Before alarm clocks sat beside every bed, before takeaway coffee warmed cold hands on winter mornings. Britain's streets were filled with people doing jobs that sound almost impossible today. Some worked in the freezing fog before sunrise. Some wandered the streets with ovens strapped to their backs. These were the forgotten side hustles Britain once needed. Number 1. Knocker up. In the dark, foggy streets of industrial Britain, knocker UPS walked from house to house carrying long bamboo poles. Their job was simple, but incredibly important. They tapped on upstairs windows until exhausted workers finally woke up for their shift. Missing work in Victorian Britain could mean losing wages a family desperately needed. So for thousands of people, this strange early morning visitor became part of daily life. Some knocker UPS used sticks. Others fired dried peas through hollow tubes at bedroom windows. And in parts of northern England, the sound of tapping echoing through silent streets became as normal as church bells. It sounds bizarre now, but before alarm clocks became cheap and reliable, Britain literally hired human alarm clocks. Number 2. Hot Potato Man. On freezing winter evenings, another familiar figure appeared beneath the gas lamps of Britain's cities. The hot potato man pushed a small portable oven through the streets, selling roasted potatoes wrapped in paper to workers heading home through the cold. For many poor families, a baked potato was one of the cheapest hot meals they could afford. But strangely, people didn't always buy them just to eat. Some laborers carried hot potatoes inside their coat pocket simply to warm their frozen hands on the journey home. In the smoky air of Victorian London, the smell of roasted potatoes drifting through the fog became part of winter itself. Warm. Cheap. Filling. A tiny comfort in an often unforgiving city. Number 3. Muffin Man. Perhaps the strangest thing about the Muffin Man is that millions of people still sing about him today without even realizing he truly existed. Do you know the Muffin Man? The Muffin Man, the Muffin Man? Do you know the Muffin Man? Who lives on Drury Lane? It and Appo's a song known throughout the English-speaking world. In Victorian Britain, muffin men wandered through middle-class neighborhoods every afternoon carrying trays of fresh muffins and crumpets balanced on their heads. To announce their arrival, they rang handbells through the streets, creating a sound once deeply associated with British afternoon tea. For many families, hearing that bell meant warmth, comfort, and a brief pause in the middle of a long working day. But behind the cheerful nursery rhyme was a far harder reality. Most muffin men worked long hours walking across London in rain, smoke, and freezing fog, hoping to sell enough bread to survive another week. The Muffin Man was simply another ordinary worker trying to survive the streets of Britain. Number 4. Crossing Sweeper. By the middle of the 19th century, Britain's growing cities had become filthy places. The streets of London were covered in mud, soot, and enormous amounts of horse manure. Crossing the road without ruining your shoes or the bottom of a long dress was almost impossible after heavy rain. So in busy streets and outside railway stations, crossing sweepers waited for pedestrians to approach. Most were poor elderly people or children with nowhere else to go. The moment they spotted a wealthy gentleman or lady preparing to cross, they rushed forward with brooms, sweeping a narrow path through the filth in exchange for a coin. Some worked from dawn until nightfall in freezing weather. Others defended their street corner from rival sweepers like territory. To Victorian Britain's middle classes, they were almost invisible. But for many children living in poverty, sweeping muddy crossings became one more desperate way to survive the industrial city. Number 5. Watercress Girl. As London slowly woke beneath the morning fog, some of the city's smallest workers were already walking the streets barefoot. The watercress girls were often only 6 or 7 years old. Before sunrise, they travelled to crowded street markets to buy bundles of fresh watercress, hoping to sell them later to labourers searching for a cheap breakfast. Watercress was known as the poor man's bread. It was cheap, filling, and one of the few fresh foods many working-class families could afford. The girls carried heavy baskets through smoke-filled streets for hours, calling out to strangers while trying to avoid hunger themselves. Cold hands. Thin dresses. Bare feet blackened by mud and coal dust. And yet despite the hardship, many still smiled at customers, trying to earn enough pennies to help keep their families alive for another day. Few images capture old Britain more painfully than the sight of a child wandering through the dawn mist, selling vegetables before most of the city had even opened its eyes. Number 6. Rat-catcher. Beneath the crowded streets of Victorian Britain, another population was thriving. Rats. They filled basements, warehouses, pubs, factories, and sewers by the thousands, feeding on overflowing rubbish and spreading fear across Britain's industrial cities. And where there were rats, there were rat-catchers. Some carried traps and poison. Others relied on fierce little terrier dogs trained to kill dozens of rats within minutes. The job was filthy, dangerous, and surprisingly respected. A skilled rat-catcher could earn good money protecting businesses from infestation. But Victorian Britain also turned rat-catching into entertainment. In noisy taverns and gambling houses, crowds gathered around rat-baiting pits, placing bets as dogs fought swarms of terrified rats for sport. The most famous rat-catchers became local celebrities, walking through London with cages strapped to their backs and dogs at their heels. Today, it sounds grotesque. But in a Britain overflowing with waste, smoke, and disease, rat-catchers were seen as necessary people doing an unpleasant job nobody else wanted. Number 7. Pure finder. If Victorian Britain already sounded dirty, this was the job that proved just how filthy it really was. The pure finders of London made money collecting dog waste from the streets. Yes, dog waste. At the time, tanneries desperately needed a substance known as pure, a material used to soften leather during the production of gloves, shoes, and luxury book covers. And strangely enough, dog dung worked perfectly. So some of the poorest people in Britain wandered the streets carrying buckets and scraping tools, searching the mud for something most people tried not to step in. The work was revolting. The smell was unbearable. And yet for many families, it was still honest work in a city where survival mattered more than dignity. Victorian newspapers often described pure finders as figures covered in filth, standing at the very bottom of London society. But hidden inside this bizarre, forgotten job was a truth about industrial Britain. Even waste had value. And someone, somewhere, was always desperate enough to collect it. Number 8. Mudlark. Along the banks of the River Thames, another hidden world appeared whenever the tide pulled back. The mud beneath London was filled with lost things. Coins. Buttons. Broken pipes. Jewellery. Fragments of old Britain buried beneath centuries of river sludge. And searching through it were the mudlarks. Most were children or desperately poor adults who waited for low tide before climbing down into the thick black mud of the Thames. For hours, they searched with bare hands, hoping to find anything valuable enough to sell. It was dangerous work. The river mud could trap people like quicksand, and the polluted water carried disease from every part of the city upstream. But for many families, the Thames became a kind of giant muddy marketplace. Today, mudlarking has become a respected hobby connected to archaeology and British history. Modern mudlarks still discover Roman coins, clay pipes, and forgotten objects hidden beneath the riverbanks. But in Victorian Britain, it wasn't a hobby. It was survival. Number 9. Night Soil Man. When darkness finally covered the streets of Victorian London, another group of workers quietly emerged from the shadows. The night soil men. Before modern sewage systems transformed Britain's cities, thousands of homes relied on cesspits and outdoor privies that slowly filled with human waste. And someone had to empty them. Working almost entirely after dark, night soil men travelled through silent alleyways carrying buckets, carts, and long-handled shovels. The smell was overwhelming. The work was dangerous. And in the cramped slums of industrial London, disease spread easily through contaminated water and overflowing waste. Many people refused to even look at the night soil men as they worked. Yet despite the disgust surrounding the job, the city depended on them completely. Without these workers, entire neighborhoods could become unlivable within weeks. In a strange and unpleasant way, the night soil men were part of the hidden machinery that kept old London alive. They labored through the night so that millions of others could wake to cleaner streets by morning.